What if one split-second decision could save a stranger's life and change yours forever? Rosemary Porter had worked at Sal's Diner in Brooklyn for 32 years, serving coffee to everyone from construction workers to businessmen in expensive suits. She'd learned to read people, the tired single mothers counting change, the elderly couples holding hands across worn vinyl booths, the men who ordered black coffee and spoke in whispers. On that gray October morning, when the man in the charcoal suit sat in her corner booth, something felt different. His hands were steady, his smile polite, but his eyes held the weight of someone carrying secrets. She poured his coffee like always, turned toward the kitchen, then glanced at the security monitor behind the counter. What she saw made her blood run cold. Without thinking, her hand shot out, knocking the steaming cup from his lips, just as he raised it to drink. The diner went silent, and everything changed. "Where are you watching from today?" Rosemary had never meant to become the kind of waitress who knew everyone's story, but 3 decades of pouring coffee had taught her more about human nature than any book ever could. She'd raised 2 sons working double shifts at Sal's, watched the neighborhood transform from working-class families to young professionals with their laptops and complicated drink orders. Through it all, the diner remained the same: red vinyl booths patched with duct tape, a jukebox that only played songs from the 50s and 60s, and Sal himself, now 78, still flipping eggs on the same griddle his father had used. The morning had started like any other Tuesday. Rosemary arrived at 5:30, tied her apron with practiced ease, and began the familiar rhythm of brewing coffee, setting tables, greeting regulars by name. Old Mr. Chen came in for his oatmeal and prune juice. The Kowalski sisters shared a stack of pancakes like they had every Tuesday for the past decade. Everything felt normal, comfortable, safe. The man walked in around 8:15, just as the morning rush was tapering off. Rosemary noticed him immediately, not because he was particularly striking, but because he carried himself differently than their usual customers. His suit was tailored, expensive but not flashy. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine. He chose the corner booth, the one with a clear view of both the entrance and the kitchen, and he sat with his back to the wall. Old habits, Rosemary thought. Her late husband Tommy had been a cop for 30 years before his heart gave out. He'd always sat the same way. "Good morning," she said warmly, approaching with a pot of coffee and a menu tucked under her arm. "What can I get started for you?" "Just coffee, thank you," he replied. His voice was cultured, slightly accented, Italian maybe, though softened by years in America. Black, no sugar. She poured carefully, the way she'd poured thousands of cups before. He nodded his thanks and picked up the newspaper someone had left behind. Rosemary returned to the counter, began wiping down the already clean surface, restocking napkin dispensers. Sal had installed new security cameras 6 months ago, after a string of break-ins hit the neighborhood. The monitor sat behind the counter, usually ignored, but something made Rosemary glance at it that morning. The screen showed multiple angles: the front door, the dining area, the kitchen entrance. One camera covered the alley behind the diner where they kept the dumpsters. It was this view that caught her attention. A young man, couldn't have been more than 25, was crouched beside the back door. He wore a dark hoodie despite the mild weather, and his hands were shaking as he pulled something from his pocket. Even on the grainy footage, Rosemary could see what it was: a small glass vial, and he was carefully, deliberately pouring its contents into a to-go cup, the kind they used for coffee. Her heart began to race. She watched as the young man sealed the cup with a plastic lid, drew an X on top with what looked like a marker, then slipped back into the kitchen through the service entrance. That door should have been locked. Someone must have propped it open, probably one of the line cooks sneaking a cigarette break. Rosemary's hands went cold. She glanced around the diner, trying to spot the young man, but the morning crowd made it difficult. Then she saw him, emerging from the kitchen hallway, the marked cup in his hand, moving toward her station. He placed it on the pickup counter with the others waiting for servers, then disappeared back toward the kitchen. The cup sat there among the innocuous breakfast orders, marked with that crude X. Her mind raced through possibilities. Wrong order? Special request? But the way he'd moved, the furtive glances, the shaking hands, nothing about it felt right. And that vial, She thought of Tommy, the stories he'd told about poisonings, revenge plots, the dark underbelly of the city he'd spent his career fighting. She looked back at the man in the corner booth. He was still reading his paper, calm and unaware. Something in her gut twisted. The marked cup, the expensive suit, the careful seating position. This wasn't random. Someone had targeted him specifically. Rosemary glanced at the pickup counter. Another waitress, young Jenny, who'd only been working there 3 weeks, was reaching for the marked cup. "Jenny, wait!" Rosemary called out, but her voice was drowned by the clatter of dishes and the hiss of the griddle. She watched in horror as Jenny picked up the cup and began walking toward the corner booth. Time seemed to slow down as Jenny approached the corner booth. The marked cup balanced on her tray alongside someone else's omelet. Rosemary's feet moved before her brain caught up, weaving between tables with an urgency that surprised her aging knees. She reached the booth just as Jenny was setting down the coffee, just as the man was reaching for it with a polite nod of thanks. "Don't drink that." The words burst from Rosemary's lips as her hand shot out, knocking the cup sideways. Hot coffee splashed across the table, soaking the newspaper and dripping onto the man's expensive trousers. The diner fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused midway to every mouth. All eyes turned to the corner booth. The man stood slowly, coffee dripping from his sleeves, his expression unreadable. Jenny gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Sal emerged from the kitchen, his weathered face a mask of confusion and concern. "Rosemary?" "What on earth—" "That coffee," Rosemary said, her voice shaking but firm. She pointed at the cup now rolling across the floor, its contents spreading in a dark pool. "Someone tampered with it. I saw it on the camera. There's poison in that cup." The word poison rippled through the diner like a stone dropped in still water. Murmurs erupted. The Kowalski sisters clutched each other. Mr. Chen pushed his oatmeal away. The man in the charcoal suit stood perfectly still, studying Rosemary with an intensity that made her feel transparent. "Show me," he said quietly. Rosemary led him to the counter, her hands trembling as she rewound the security footage. Sal, the man, and now 2 off-duty police officers who'd been having breakfast crowded around the small monitor. The grainy video played back, the young man in the hoodie, the vial, the careful preparation, the marked cup. "That's Tony," Sal said, his voice heavy with disbelief and pain. "My nephew. He started working in the kitchen last week." His face crumpled. "What has he done?" One of the police officers was already on his radio, calling for backup. The other moved toward the kitchen, hand instinctively moving to where his service weapon would normally rest. But the young man was gone, slipped out the same way he'd entered, the back door hanging open to reveal an empty alley. The man in the charcoal suit turned to Rosemary. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair. He looked tired, she thought. Tired and sad. "You saved my life," he said simply. Rosemary's voice caught. "I couldn't just watch someone die. Not in my diner, not on my watch." "Your diner?" "Well, Sal's diner, but I've worked here since I was 23. These people, this place, it's family." Something shifted in the man's expression. He extended his hand. "Vincent Calabrese." Rosemary took it, noting the firm grip, the calluses that spoke of a life not always spent in expensive suits. "Rosemary Porter." "Mrs. Porter, I wonder if we could speak privately." They sat in the booth, the now coffee-stained booth that had nearly been the scene of a murder. The police were processing the marked cup as evidence, interviewing witnesses, taking statements. Sal was in the corner, head in his hands, trying to reconcile his nephew's betrayal. But Vincent's attention was focused entirely on Rosemary. "You recognized me," he said. "It wasn't a question." "I recognized the situation," Rosemary corrected gently. "My husband was a police officer for 30 years. He told me stories. The way you sit, the way you watch the room. You're someone who's learned to be careful. And someone was very determined for you not to leave this diner alive." Vincent nodded slowly. "I've spent the last 15 years trying to leave certain aspects of my past behind. I thought I'd succeeded. I own legitimate businesses now, restaurants, construction companies. I employ hundreds of people. I pay my taxes. I go to church. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. My daughter just graduated medical school. My son is studying architecture. I wanted to give them something better than what I had. But the past doesn't always let go, Rosemary said softly. No, it doesn't. Vincent looked at the spreading coffee stain on the table. There are people who believe I know things that could send them to prison for the rest of their lives. They're wrong. I've kept my mouth shut for 15 years, and I'll take those secrets to my grave. But they don't believe me. They can't afford to believe me. So they tried to poison you. They've tried other methods. This is the closest they've come to succeeding. Vincent met her eyes. If you're moved by what happened here today, please give this video a thumbs up. But more importantly, Mrs. Porter, you need to understand something. They won't stop. And now, by saving me, you've made yourself visible to very dangerous people. Rosemary felt ice forming in her stomach. What are you saying? I'm saying that young man in the kitchen, Sal's nephew, he was paid to do this. When they learn he failed, when they learn why he failed, they'll want to know who you are. They'll want to make sure you can't identify anyone else. They'll want to eliminate the witness. Vincent leaned forward, his voice urgent but kind. I can protect you, but you need to trust me. Can you do that? The question hung in the air between them, as Rosemary realized her simple act of kindness had just changed everything. Rosemary's first instinct was to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Protect her. She was a 68-year-old widow who lived alone in a rent-controlled apartment with her cat, Winston. She took the bus to work, clipped coupons, and her biggest adventure was trying new recipes from the cooking shows she watched on Sunday afternoons. Dangerous people wanting to eliminate her felt like something from a movie. Not her real life, but Vincent's eyes held no humor, only genuine concern, and suddenly the laughter died in her throat. I don't understand, she said, hearing the tremor in her own voice. I'm nobody. I just work here. You're a witness who can identify their operative. You're a complication they can't afford. Vincent pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, then turned it to show her. It was a news article from 8 years ago. A woman in Queens who'd witnessed a mob-related shooting. 3 weeks later, her apartment had caught fire. Accidental, the report said. Faulty wiring. They're very good at making problems disappear, Mrs. Porter. The diner suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in. Rosemary thought of her sons, Michael in Seattle with his wife and 2 daughters, David in Florida running his boat charter business. They called every Sunday, worried about her living alone, constantly trying to convince her to retire, to move closer to one of them. She'd always resisted, clinging to her independence, her routine, her life. What about Sal? She asked. If his nephew was involved, Sal's not responsible for his nephew's choices. But yes, they'll question him. They'll make sure he understood the cost of cooperation. Vincent's expression darkened. I've already made some calls. Sal and his wife will have protection. So will Jenny and the other staff who were here today. You can do that? Just make calls and have people protected? Let's just say I still have friends who remember when I did them favors. Friends who understand debts need to be repaid. Vincent stood, adjusting his coffee-stained jacket. Right now, you need to pack a bag. Essential items only. You can't go home. They may already be watching your apartment. One of my associates will take you somewhere safe while we sort this out. Everything was happening too fast. Rosemary felt like she was caught in a current, being swept along without any control. For how long? However long it takes. Vincent's voice softened. I know this isn't fair. You were just doing your job, being a good person. But that's the world I come from, Mrs. Porter. Good deeds don't always lead to good outcomes. A police detective approached them, asking for formal statements. As Rosemary recounted what she'd seen, describing the young man, the vial, the marked cup, she noticed Vincent watching her with something like admiration. When the detective finished and walked away, Vincent said quietly, You're very brave. I'm terrified. Brave people usually are. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing despite it. He paused. My late wife used to say that. She was a lot like you, actually. Saw the best in people. believed everyone deserved kindness. She made me want to be better than I was. What happened to her? Cancer, 5 years ago. She made me promise I'd keep trying to be the man she believed I could be. Some days that's harder than others. Vincent pulled out a business card, wrote something on the back. This is my personal number. Call if you need anything, anytime. And Mrs. Porter, thank you. Not just for the coffee, for reminding me why I'm trying so hard to leave the past behind. A large man in a dark suit appeared at Vincent's elbow, spoke in low tones. Vincent nodded, then turned back to Rosemary. Marcus will take you somewhere safe. You can trust him completely. I'll be in touch within 24 hours with a plan. As Rosemary gathered her purse and coat, Sal approached, his eyes red-rimmed. Rosemary, I'm so sorry. I had no idea Tony was involved in something like this. If anything happens to you, it won't, she said firmly, hugging her old boss. We'll figure this out, Sal. We always do. But as Marcus led her out the back door to a waiting black SUV, Rosemary couldn't help wondering if this was one problem that couldn't be solved with hard work and optimism. Have you ever faced a moment where a simple choice spiraled into something far bigger than you imagined? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. The city streets blurred past the tinted windows as they drove, and Rosemary realized with a sinking feeling that she was leaving behind the only life she'd ever known, with no guarantee she'd ever be able to return. The safe house was a modest cottage in suburban New Jersey, the kind of place where neighbors waved from porches and kids played basketball in driveways. Inside, it was simply furnished but clean, with a kitchen that reminded Rosemary of her grandmother's house, and windows that overlooked a garden gone wild with autumn chrysanthemums. Marcus checked every room, tested the locks, and showed her the panic button installed by the landline phone, before leaving her alone with instructions to keep the curtains drawn and the doors locked. Rosemary sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea, trying to process the last 6 hours. Her phone buzzed. Michael calling from Seattle. She let it go to voicemail. What could she possibly tell him? She couldn't explain without terrifying him, couldn't lie convincingly enough to ease his worry. So she sat in silence, watching dust motes dance in the strip of sunlight that snuck through the curtain's edge, and wondered how a simple morning at work had turned her entire existence upside down. Vincent arrived as evening shadows stretched across the garden. He'd changed into casual clothes, jeans and a sweater, and carried bags from what smelled like an Italian restaurant. Figured you hadn't eaten, he said, unpacking containers of pasta, bread, salad. Hope you like rigatoni. They ate at the small table, and Rosemary found herself relaxing despite everything. Vincent had that effect, she realized. He made people comfortable. It was probably what had made him successful in his previous life, and what made him dangerous, the ability to make people trust him, to let down their guard. I found out who ordered the hit, Vincent said, setting down his fork. His name is Luca Martinelli. He was my associate 20 years ago, before I got out. He's convinced I'm going to testify against him in an upcoming federal case. Are you? I wasn't. I've kept every secret I ever learned. But now? Vincent's jaw tightened. Now he's involved you, Sal. Innocent people just trying to live their lives. That changes things. What are you going to do? I'm going to meet with him tomorrow, face to face, and I'm going to give him a choice. Let this go and I stay silent, or keep pursuing this vendetta, and I tell the FBI everything I know about every operation he's ever run. Vincent met her eyes. I wanted you to hear it from me first. There's a chance this doesn't end peacefully. Rosemary set down her tea, her hand remarkably steady. Why would you risk that? You said you wanted to protect your children, your new life. My children will be safer with Luca in prison than constantly looking over their shoulders wondering when he'll come for them next. And you, Vincent's voice softened. You risked yourself to save a stranger. The least I can do is risk myself to save you. I didn't risk anything. I just knocked over a cup of coffee. You knocked over that coffee knowing there might be consequences. You saw danger and ran toward it instead of away. That's the definition of courage, Mrs. Porter. And it reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. That there are still good people in the world worth protecting. The next morning, Vincent left early. Marcus stayed with Rosemary. a silent presence reading a paperback in the living room while she pretended to watch television. Hours crawled by. She tried calling Vincent twice, but it went straight to voicemail. By noon, her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold her coffee cup. The phone finally rang at 2:15. Vincent's voice sounded tired but alive. "It's over." Lucas agreed to back off. "We reached an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" "The kind where I keep certain information to myself, and he forgets you exist. He's also retiring, moving to Italy permanently. The feds will be disappointed, but you'll be safe. Everyone will be safe." Rosemary felt tears prickling her eyes. "Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Porter. For everything." A pause. "Marcus will bring you home tomorrow. Your apartment's been secured, and I'm arranging for a security system to be installed. It's over." But when she hung up, Rosemary realized it wasn't entirely over. She'd glimpsed a world she'd only known through Tommy's stories. A world of danger and darkness and impossible choices. And in that world, she'd found something unexpected. A man trying desperately to be better than his past. To protect the people he'd never meant to endanger. That evening, as she packed her small bag, Marcus knocked on the door. "Mr. Calabresi wanted me to give you this," he said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a check, enough money to retire comfortably, to visit her sons whenever she wanted, to finally take that trip to Ireland she'd always dreamed about. And a note in elegant handwriting. "Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists. Please accept this as a small token of my gratitude. You saved my life, but more importantly, you restored my faith. If you've been moved by this journey, please subscribe to our channel for more stories about ordinary people making extraordinary choices." V. Rosemary folded the note carefully, tucked it in her purse, and looked out at the garden one last time before heading home. Rosemary returned to Sal's diner 3 days later. The morning rush was in full swing, the familiar clatter of dishes and hum of conversation wrapping around her like a warm blanket. Sal looked up from the griddle, relief flooding his weathered face. "Rosemary? Thank God. I've been worried sick." She tied on her apron, picked up the coffee pot, and slipped back into her routine, as if the world hadn't tilted on its axis. But everything felt different now. The weight of every cup she poured, the meaning behind every smile she offered. It all seemed more precious somehow, more intentional. The marked cup had been sent to a lab. The contents were indeed poison, a fast-acting toxin that would have caused a heart attack within minutes, virtually undetectable in an autopsy without specific testing. Young Tony had been arrested at a bus station trying to flee to Canada. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he'd provided evidence against several higher-level operatives in Luca's organization. The dominoes were falling, but quietly, away from public scrutiny. The way these things usually happened, Vincent had explained. Vincent himself came by the diner a week later, during the slow afternoon lull between lunch and dinner. He ordered coffee, regular coffee poured by Rosemary with a steady hand, and a slice of Sal's famous apple pie. "How are you doing?" he asked. "I'm all right. Still jumping at shadows sometimes, but Marcus says that's normal. It'll fade." She poured herself a cup, sat across from him. "How about you?" Relieved, tired, grateful. Vincent smiled. "My daughter called yesterday. She wants to bring her boyfriend to meet me. Says she's serious about him. First time she's ever introduced me to someone she's dating. That's wonderful." "It is. I think she finally believes I'm really out of that life. That I'm just her father now, not the man I used to be." His voice grew thick with emotion. "You helped give me that, Mrs. Porter. By saving my life, you gave me the chance to keep being the father my children need. You did that yourself. I just knocked over some coffee." "You keep saying that, but we both know it was more than that." Vincent finished his pie, left cash on the table that was 3 times the bill. "I won't keep bothering you. I just wanted to check in, make sure you're really okay." "I am. But Vincent, if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who understands what it's like to carry a complicated past, I'm usually here." Sal's diner, 5:30 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon, Tuesday through Saturday. He stood, squeezed her shoulder gently. "That means more than you know." Rosemary watched him leave. watched him pause at the door to hold it open for Mrs. Chen, who was arriving for her afternoon tea and gossip with the Kowalski sisters. Life continuing, ordinary and beautiful and infinitely precious, she never cashed Vincent's check. Instead, she framed it alongside the note and hung it in her living room, a reminder of the day everything changed. She did use some of her savings to finally book that trip to Ireland, brought back photos of green hills and ancient castles that she showed to anyone who'd listen. Michael and David visited more often, relieved their mother was finally slowing down, considering retirement. But every morning she still arrived at Sal's at 5:30, still poured coffee for the regulars, still listened to their stories and shared in their joys and sorrows. Because that's what mattered, she'd learned. Not the dramatic moments that changed everything, but the quiet accumulation of kindness, day after day, cup after cup, conversation after conversation. 6 months later, a young man came into the diner. He was thin, nervous, with eyes that darted around the room like a trapped animal. He ordered coffee and sat in the corner booth, the same booth where Vincent had once sat. Rosemary approached with the pot, and something in the young man's expression stopped her. "You're looking at me like you recognize something," he said quietly. "I recognize someone who's scared, someone who's running from something, or maybe running toward something better." His eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to get out. I don't know how to start over." Rosemary set down the pot, pulled out a chair, sat across from him. Everyone's path is different. But the first step is always deciding you want to change. The second step is asking for help. She gave him Vincent's number, watched him stare at it like it was a lifeline thrown into dark water. "Call him. Tell him Rosemary sent you. He understands what it's like to try to be better than your past." The young man left with the number clutched in his shaking hand, and Rosemary said a small prayer that he'd find the courage to use it. That's how life works sometimes. One act of kindness ripples outward, touches lives in ways we can't predict or measure. Rosemary had saved Vincent. Vincent had saved her. And now maybe they'd both help save someone else. As the afternoon sun slanted through the diner windows, catching dust motes and coffee steam in equal measure, Rosemary thought about all the stories these walls held, all the lives that intersected here over eggs and toast and bottomless cups of coffee. This was her purpose, she realized. Not dramatic rescues or dangerous adventures, but simply showing up day after day, ready to offer kindness to whoever walked through the door. If you enjoyed this journey, please take a moment to like this video. Share your thoughts in the comments below about times when a small act of kindness changed everything, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories about ordinary people making extraordinary choices. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing that goodness still exists in unexpected places. Until next time, may your coffee be hot, your hearts be warm, and your days be filled with moments worth remembering.